Hello, my name is Parker Haney. I'm a advancing computer science student here at UAT, and really quick for my board's presentation, I'm going to be going over each objective and how I have met those objectives with my projects. So starting off here, I have my Oasis desktop application. This is an innovative stress relief application for desktop, and I went through the process of creating these UI mockups within Figma. Here is a UI mockup of the exercise tab, and then here is the finalized look of the exercise tab, and I created this using Visual Studio. Moving on, I have my calendar/schedule application. This is a very simple application that allows you to create a schedule for each day on the calendar. Here are UI mockups that I made within Figma, and here is the finalized design of that UI. Next, I have my Dino Discovery website. I made this to showcase the correct pronunciation of different dinosaur names. Here you can see a wireframe that I made within Figma and the finalized design. And here are what the pages look like for each dinosaur species. Moving on to Objective 2. I need to demonstrate that I know how to code in multiple different programming languages and have used multiple different IDEs. This is my simple note-taking application. I use Java to program this application, and I made this application in IntelliJ. All this application does is allow the user to create notes and view notes in a .txt file. Next, I have my Flower Shop Simulator application. I made this using Rust, and I used Visual Studio Code instead of Visual Studio. And all this does is kind of simulate what the experience would be like to go through a flower shop and buy a flower. Next, I have my Cretaceous browser application. I made this using C# and I used Visual Studio IDE. And I made this to kind of give a different theme to what would normally be a pretty bland browser interface. Next, moving on to Objective 3. All of this is going to be databases that I created in my Introduction to Databases class. This is a tech business database that I made for a tech business. It keeps track of multiple different buildings, their locations, the owner of those buildings, the employees that work at those buildings, as well as customer information like customer name, the products that they purchased, as well as the total cost and the purchase date. Moving on, I have my car dealership database. This holds on to information for a car dealership. It shows you the customers that have purchased a car, the make and model of the car that they purchased, the date in which they purchased it, and the total cost. Moving on, I have my trivia database right here. This is a pretty simple database that holds on to a bunch of different trivia questions, the contestants for each trivia question, and whether or not that contestant got the question correct. So moving on to Objective 4. Here I created a bunch of different mobile applications within my two React Native classes. This is my Jurassic Park Experience mobile app. And pretty much what this application does, it requires you to log in. After you log in, you can visit 5 different dinosaur enclosures and you can play the sound of that enclosure. And these images specifically were captured on my actual iPhone. Next, I have the Space Jam mobile application. I coded this using React Native, and it pretty much just tells you information about each planet within our solar system. And these screenshots were captured on an emulated mobile device. And last but not least, I have my frog species application. Once again, I used React Native for this, and it pretty much just shows you and tells you the name of a bunch of different cool frog species. And once again, these screenshots were taken on an emulated mobile device. And moving on to objective number 5. Here I once again am showing my Oasis desktop application, and here you can see I used Figma. Here's the actual what the Figma application looks like, and you can see that I created these UI mockups within Figma, and I also used Visual Studio as my IDE to create this application. Next, there is the calendar/schedule application. Once again, I always use Figma for my UI mockups. So here you can see that I use Figma for these two images here. These are the UI mockups for this application. And once again, I did code this entire project within Visual Studio. And then last but not least, I have my Dino Discovery website. Once again, using Figma to create these UI mockups. And I actually made this application within Visual Studio Code instead of Visual Studio. All right, heading on to the very last objective. This is a odd application that I made. It is the making a map application. Coded this in C++, and essentially what this does is that it uses a loop to run through an array of different numbers, and each number creates a map, and each number represents a different element of the map. You can see the actual map over here, and how each number corresponds to a different part of that map. Moving on, I have my book search application. This is a very simple application that allows you to search through an array or list of books using a linear search algorithm to see if a library has that book. If it does have that book, then it will show you the row that the book is on. And if it doesn't have that book, then it will ask you to search for another book. Then I finally have my roster creator application, which is kind of like the book search application, but instead of using a searching algorithm, it actually uses a sorting algorithm. So how it works is that you just kind of run the application, you can input a bunch of different names, and then it will take those names, put them in alphabetical order, and just like that, you have your roster created. And those are all of the objectives for my Advancing Computer Science major. And yeah, thank you for watching.